election channel.
6 o'clock, this is Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening. So as a number of politicians and journalists have been reportedly caught up in a honey trap texting scam, we're asking whether Parliament's seedy reputation made MPs an easy target. And the ultimate proof that lockdowns made us fat and lazy. Consumption of calories by fast food is up by a whopping 50% since the start of the pandemic. Child obesity is skyrocketing and nobody seems to care. So how do we reset our relationship to food and fitness? And farmers are calling for a universal basic income, an unconditional state handout to plug the gap left by EU subsidies. We need to help our farmers, don't we? But is this the solution? Shouldn't they just receive fairer prices from the supermarkets? And the number of people cheating on their written driving theory test has tripled in the last 2 years. What has made young people so unable to sit exams, and how harshly should this be punished? Very harshly, in my opinion. Do you agree? That's all to come in the next hour with two fantastic guests. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Polly.
Bev, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story this hour: the mastermind of an armed robbery in Yorkshire 19 years ago that ended in a police officer being shot dead has been found guilty of her murder. If you're watching on TV, footage has been released showing the two police officers as they responded to the emergency call, arriving at the scene of the armed robbery in 2005. 38-year-old Sharon Beshanivsky died after she interrupted that raid, which took place at a travel agent's in Bradford. She'd only been a police officer for 9 months. Pirandita Khan flew to Pakistan 2 months after the murder and remained at large until he was arrested in 2020. In other news today, the former Tory minister Sir Alan Duncan is being investigated for comments he made which accused two Conservative peers of, in his words, doing the bidding of Israel's Prime Minister. Sir Alan served as a Foreign Office Minister under Theresa May. During an interview with LBC, he claimed the Conservative Friends of Israel group was, in his words, doing the bidding of the Israeli Prime Minister. He said two of its prominent members, Lord Polak and Lord Pickles, should be removed from the House of Lords. Well, it's understood when the party had written to Sir Alan to inform him of the investigation which could result in him being expelled. He said the case lacked substance and could prove dangerously harmful to the Tories' reputation. Meanwhile, an independent investigation into an attack which killed 7 aid workers in Gaza is being demanded by the World Central Kitchen charity. British nationals John Chapman, James Henderson and James Kirby were among those killed by an airstrike. And in other news, more than 600 British legal experts, including 3 former Supreme Court judges, are now calling on the UK to stop selling arms to Israel. They say there's a plausible risk the weapons may be used to commit serious violations of international law and that the Prime Minister must change Britain's policy. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says the government must publish the legal advice it's received on the UK's arrangements with Israel.
The law of the UK is very, very clear. If there is any possibility of anything exported from the UK being involved in a serious violation of humanitarian law, it cannot be exported from the UK. So the government will have had legal advice on that specific to the conflict in Gaza. We've asked them to publish that legal advice. It would be, I think, a reasonable step, given what has happened in the last few days and what has happened over the last few months, to make clear the legal position and to make sure the government itself and we are currently complying with UK law.
The Prime Minister says Britain could pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights if it obstructs the government's Rwanda plan. Rishi Sunak says controlling illegal migration is more important than membership of the ECHR, and he would not let a foreign court interfere in sovereign matters. The leader of the Liberal Democrats is calling for a new system to flag which of Britain's waterways are safe enough for people to swim in. Cases of waterborne diseases such as dysentery have soared by nearly 60% since 2010, while overflows of spilled sewage into rivers and seas in 2023 were more than double than the previous year. So Ed Davey says something needs to be done to ensure people know which waters are safe for swimming.
The Environment Agency, Ofwat and the government need to be cracking down on companies to make sure they're not just giving money to their shareholders and to their executives, but actually investing that money to clean up rivers like the River Nid. And we want to actually raise standards, so we're calling for a new blue flag status for rivers like the River Nid, which would give a signal to people that it would be safe to swim in these rivers. People used to do that, but now if they do that, children end up getting awful diseases from the E. coli and the bacteria from the sewage and ending up in hospital. That's unacceptable. So we need to raise standards, and that's what Liberal Democrats are campaigning for.
It's Ed Davey. Now, British farmers are calling for a guaranteed basic income after post-Brexit arrangements left many worse off. At least 100 have joined a campaign group urging the government to help cover basic costs after the loss of subsidies from the European Union. Analysis last year by the organic farming group Riverford found that half of Britain's fruit and vegetable growers may go out of business within a year. It comes as suppliers warn of higher prices and empty supermarket shelves due to a new post-Brexit border charge, which will be introduced at the end of this month. Judges have been told to consider more lenient sentencing for offenders from deprived or difficult backgrounds. The Sentencing Council, which sets guidelines for judges and magistrates, has for the first time outlined mitigating factors that it says courts need to consider before handing down a sentence. They include poverty, low educational standards, discrimination and insecure housing. But critics say the law should treat everyone equally, with the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, describing the guidelines as patronising and inaccurate. Leicester City Council says sensitive information has been posted online by a known ransomware group after it was stolen in a cyber attack. The local authority was the victim of a hack last month, forcing it to shut down its IT systems. It's confirmed that confidential documents have now been published by that group of hackers, including rent statements and some personal details. The group is known to have attacked a number of other government education and healthcare departments. The National Cyber Security Centre is now involved in the ongoing criminal investigation into that. Dozens of people are still missing and 10 people are known to have died after a major earthquake in Taiwan. People have been urged to keep clear of mountainous areas due to the risk of falling rocks and buildings. More than 1,000 people have suffered injuries, with nervous residents experiencing more than 300 aftershocks. However, emergency workers have been commended for their quick responses, with shelters in operation up within just 2 hours of the major quake. And if you thought adjusting to daylight saving time was hard, how about adjusting to lunar time? The moon is to get its own time zone, apparently, all in an effort to provide a coordinated benchmark for spacecraft and satellites. But it's not quite as simple as just readjusting your watch or your clocks, with the moon's differing gravitational forces affecting how time unfolds, relative, we're told by scientists, to how we perceive it here on Earth. For those planning a trip to space, NASA hopes to develop its new lunar time by the end of 2026. That's your news, and for the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Welcome to Dewbs & Co. It's me tonight, Bev Turner. My panel, half of them are here. Former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie. And we're waiting for the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. But Kelvin, as is the way in London, Aaron has got on the train, but you can never be sure anymore that anything works.
Well, I see that they're planning another strike, RMT. What puzzles me about trains is why is it the signalling, which is the basis of all trains and has been going now since, I think, about 1812, so where are we now? A couple of hundred years.
Yeah.
How is it that signalling still doesn't work?
Yeah.
What is it? It's not new tech, it's not some smart app, it's not this, it's not that, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And anybody who travels, as I do on I think you do as well.
I do.
Anybody who travels regularly by train faces this issue, if not every day, certainly every other day.
Yeah.
And I would like to have somebody come on here, anybody that's watching, explain why doesn't signalling work 200 years later?
This weekend, we weren't planning on discussing travel this evening, ladies and gentlemen, but as we are waiting for Aaron to arrive as well, this Easter weekend, I had to go up to Chester for a family event. I was dying to go on the train. I love a train journey, but it was about 300 quid per person return to go bank holiday Friday to Monday.
Yeah.
And there's 5 of us in our family. And also, there was bus replacement for half the journey anyway.
Right, so that journey, which would have taken you, we say, a couple of hours, 2.5 hours
That's
or something,
right,
would actually have probably taken you 4 or 5 hours. This happened to a member of my family as well at the Easter. It's a
joke.
It is a total joke. And perhaps somebody else who watches, and obviously you have some, you obviously have some clever people watching, perhaps they'd like to explain why is it that bus replacement is totally across the entire network. The whole system is breaking down, and the idea that nationalising trains is going to be better. I can remember when before it became privatised, I lived in Sevenoaks, and I would literally take the next train that was coming in, heading towards London, because there was no such thing as a timetable. So, is it the workforce? Are they dim and idle? Is it the management? Are they dim and idle?
Yeah.
We spend billions on it. Is that it? We have the dearest rail fares across Europe. So what is the explanation?
I have no idea. But talking of dim and idle, let's move on to our main story of the evening, because I want to talk about these MPs. 12 of them apparently caught up in a naked honey trap cyber sex sting. Now, when I realised it was you tonight, Kelvin, I thought, bingo. Because...
Okay, well, you thought I'd get caught immediately.
No, that's not where I was going with that. Because I thought, you as an ex-tabloid journalist, there was a time when journalists might have done this kind of thing. Perhaps officially or unofficially. Maybe you send a young reporter, a pretty girl, into a bar. No? Nothing you're prepared to admit to.
To be honest with you, the truth about the matter in my day, people were always throwing themselves at pop stars and the like anyway.
Right.
And you didn't have to go in for this. This is a ridiculous story. What politician is going to fall for somebody who they've never heard of, sending them a picture of themselves with no clothes on?
At least 12 at the moment, Kelvin. This is the depressing thing about it.
They weren't caught by it, were they? Didn't they go to the cops over it and said, that's what's happened to me?
No, it seems like, and as we say, this is day one of this story, and I expect it's going to run and run. Apparently, they got emails from individuals going under the aliases of Abby or Charlie, and they're all men. There's some straight men, some gay men. And they were sent emails that seemed very innocuous. Hi, great to meet you at that Westminster event last week. Hope everything worked out with X. They had enough detail in there to seem plausible. Some of the MPs and the political staffers who've been approached about this said that they then felt embarrassed. They couldn't remember meeting this person because, of course, you meet loads of people at those do's. So they've gone, I don't remember quite meeting them. But then they've emailed back and then they've said, I quite enjoyed having a little flirt with you at the party. And they've gone, I can't quite remember, but that sounds quite interesting.
So they were both men, were they? I took it that one of them was a woman.
No, some of them are women.
Oh, there are.
Some of them appear to have been approached by women. Well, it could be anybody, couldn't it, who sent the messages.
Right, so what kind of person believes that this is going to work? And what is... I presume it's blackmail, is it?
Well, that's what we don't know at the moment.
It can't be a tabloid thing, because the trouble now with tabloid is if you did that... the problem would be for the news outlet, would not be for the person who fell for the sting.
That's right.
So it can't possibly be journalist based. Could it be more likely Russian based?
Well, that's the speculation. The speculation is that it might have been a Russian operative. Syrian Duncan Smith has been talking about it. He says the attacks are, the quote is, straight out of the Russian playbook.
Right.
And he's urged the authorities to increase security. Now, he calls it an attack on democracy. Is it an attack on democracy, or is it just MPs being easily flattered?
OK, let me ask you this. Were any women approached? No. That's because,
as far as we know,
that's because they're smarter than to recognise some bloke not with his kit off, knowing that it's not a scam, right? Because they're probably getting that morning, noon, and night anyway. So. Right, so what would the Russians... I suppose if they get one hit out of... How many MPs are there?
12 at the moment.
Yeah, but 635.
Correct,
and
yeah.
They put them out. And if they get one hit, that is a triumph as far as they're concerned. When you say they knew... did they know a lot about the people, or did they know a little about them? A
little about the people, the kind of stuff you might be able to work out from maybe looking at someone's Facebook profile or something like that, and you've found out the name of their partner, and then you've said, oh, I hope Kathy is well. I bumped into her last week.
Right.
It's very simple stuff.
Right. Well, look, the Russians themselves, it's all they've got to do, you know, apart from trying to kill innocent people in the Ukraine. I suppose this is another idea within the Putin playbook. And all I would say is, surely, if anybody sees anything like this, they know what it is. There's been publication. It came through Politico, didn't it? So if they see publicity like this, then they know what to do. Either they go to the cops or they just kill it.
Well, it came from 2 mobile phone numbers, the messages. So they, I guess, can, to some degree, maybe they can be tracked. They will probably end up being nothing but burner phones, won't they? But one ex-MP said, oh, I just thought, or a staffer said, oh, I just thought it was Westminster because it's full of weird people. That's a bit of a damning indictment. I mean, well, I don't entirely disagree with them.
Well, I was at Nigel Farage's do last night.
No weird people in that room, Kelvin.
As was your newsreader, Polly. And there were some strange codes there, I can tell you that.
But you've been around enough politicians to know that there aren't enough good quality politicians. Why is that? Why doesn't it attract a better calibre of person?
OK, well, first of all, if you've got... I think there are 2 significant reasons. There are probably 3, actually. Number 1, if you've really got something about you, you don't want to earn $90,000 a year, OK? Now,
that sounds like quite a lot of money.
Yeah, it's money, but if you've got something about you, you can make $90,000 a year with a couple of side hustles, right? And if you're really clever, you can probably make a lot more. Right. Secondly, your life is laid bare. So any kind of question mark about you, your personality, your relationship, expect to read it or see it somewhere, right? So why would you do that for $90,000 a year? Thirdly, and this will probably come as a shock to your viewers, they work hard.
Yeah.
It's long hours and long days. And all right, they go back to their home, wherever their home is, and they're walking down the street, and there'll be some idiot across the road saying, "Here, you, here, I hate you. Why did you vote like that?" And or actually, you get the other side. I just want to say thank you very much indeed. But you're never off duty, and all your actions are on duty and can be reported. So why on earth, in this world, especially with social media now, why on earth would you give up your life?
To help people and change the world, Kelvin, and to do good things for your country and be driven by a need to improve things for everybody?
Yes, there will be people like that, but I would suspect they're in the minority.
It doesn't sound like you met many. Right, Aaron Bastani has hot-footed it into the building, apparently, so he's going to be joining us any minute now. But still to come, junk food consumption is up by 50% since lockdowns, and now new clinics for overweight children are opening. Why are we eating so much more fast food? How do we reset our relationship with health and diet?
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
When I was president of the Durham Union, back in 2016-17, I was hosting a debate, which was the question, this House sees China as a threat to the West. Now, it wasn't saying that that's what we believed. That was a question.
Up for debate.
On one side, we had the former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind. On the other side, we invited a woman by the name of Anastasia Lin. Now, she's someone who's been expelled from China for her human rights activism. She's a former Miss World contestant who's a great speaker. But we started getting loads of complaints. into my inbox from Chinese students at Durham University, and they started to say, why are you hosting this debate? Why have you invited Anastasia Lin? She is banned from China. You can't host this woman. You can't host her. You can't have her
Were they copy
in your
and paste
debate.
jobs?
They were all very, very similar. And we were sort of thinking, well, this is a union that is hundreds of years old, founded on the principles of free speech. We're not going to listen because some students are upset. And then it got to the point where I was pulled out of a tutorial that I was in, told to go to the union office and take a phone call from the Chinese embassy. And so I was taking a phone call here from diplomats in the Chinese embassy saying, you have to cancel this debate. You have to cancel this debate.
Crazy.
At one point, they even threatened the UK's trade terms with China. I think they thought that I was perhaps a representative of the British state. I wasn't. I was a student. But I ignored them and I said, no, we're going to host this debate. We hosted the debate. It was a massive success. We heard strong arguments on either side. And frankly...
You know, it's a good thing that you were there to make sure that your university and its union upheld the values of Britain and our liberal democracy.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good evening, it's Dewbs & Co, but with me, Bev Turner, tonight while Michelle is on her Easter holidays. Keeping me company until 7, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. And he's now joined us, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Hideous journey in, Aaron.
Awful. I was raised to think that being on time was late, so God knows what I was.
Oh, well, yeah. We had a little chat about the state of the trains in this country, but listen, let's move on to this other story. So this is about the fact that after lockdown, it appears, we all developed a habit for takeaways and for eating too much and for just sending a message on our phone and to having the food arrive at our house. I mean, I knew it was going to be bad after lockdowns, but I didn't think we'd be consuming 50% more calories via takeaways. Why are we doing it, Aaron?
It's just an extraordinary number, isn't it? Because, look, the press likes these horror stories to get you excited, to get your eyeballs. But a 50% increase in the use of takeaways by calories from 2019 to today, there's no sign that it's going to reverse. And I think with COVID, we got this intersection of the technology, which was there before, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and then this moment which really changed consumer habits, possibly forever. And I can't lie, I never, ever, ever got takeaways before COVID, but these apps have become so commonplace now. You might get a £10 off voucher through your email and you'd say to your other half, let's just have this, you know. It might even be moderately healthy for a takeaway.
Yeah.
But even for somebody like myself who never used to get them, absolutely, it's on our radar more, and it's not good.
It's one of the list of behavioural changes. So, and like you say, I think it will be forever. I can't see how we go back, Kelvin, to
I think I'm puzzled, right? So where I live, the postcodes can get mixed up, so therefore I don't have Deliveroo. I am, honestly, looking at this face, I'm old. I actually go out and pick up the food myself. Really? You've met somebody? Yes, thank you very much. Anyway, so the bottom line on this is I know a shocking example of this. This is based up in Newcastle. Family, right down on their luck, got no money, they've got no work, nothing, right? No, it's not Rupert Murdoch. And, and what do? Down the road from them, about 80 yards away, is a McDonald's, and they have Deliveroos brought into them. OK? Now, I know this, 101%, right? I don't spend my time with this family, but I do know of this.
Yeah.
And this is another aspect of the world we're in. And I wonder whether, actually, if you looked at it as a class system, and I know this is one of your PhD areas, right? If you looked at it as a class system, would you actually say that the people at the bottom of the pile are actually spending a bigger percentage of their income on takeaway, and also potentially putting on huge weights? In this piece about this these very fat kids, I'm not even sure you're allowed to say that, but very fat kids.
You are here.
Right? The average. Did you see the average weight? The average weight was 19 stone.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly, that is a major health issue, no matter which party's in power, whether it's the communists or the or whatever. So I think. What can you do? Why is it that parents aren't saying you're not having a triple burger with extra fries?
That's the issue, isn't it? It's parents as well, Aaron, isn't it? Not saying to kids you can't have that. I sat and watched a family at Easter weekend, and don't get me wrong, I know it's difficult. I've got 3 teens. It's really hard to educate them on what they should and shouldn't eat. And actually, by the time they're teenagers, it's too late. You've got to start when they're babies. You've got to start when they're toddlers, just educating their palate. But I watched this family at Easter weekend, and the kids were obviously full, but Mum had bought ice creams and chocolate and was saying to them, the kids wanted to run around, but she was saying, come and finish your ice cream, come and finish your chocolate, come and finish your ice cream. And I sat there and I was thinking, they obviously don't want it. But it's almost like for some families, and maybe it is a socioeconomic thing, the fear of them being hungry is more than the fear of them being fat. And we have to change that. It's okay to be hungry.
One, yeah.
All right.
It is okay to be hungry, and the Japanese have a great word for this, where you basically stop eating when you're 80% full. For an older generation, like my mother-in-law, she's Maltese. You obviously had the bombing of Malta. She was raised in incredibly deprived circumstances, so she really takes, finish your plate. I get that. We've lived in a set of conditions of food and material abundance now for decades. We shouldn't be doing that anymore. Also on mental health, Beverly. Everybody watching or listening, we all know this. If you eat rubbish for several days, you will feel awful.
Yeah.
And there are very real mental health problems in the world. I'm not pretending that they can all be solved by getting up earlier or exercise or eating well, but a lot of them could be.
Yeah.
And I would just say, of course, a lot of blame is with the parents. Is that, though, the sort of takeaway? Because, of course, it's not the fault of the kids. So something has to be done. It's not simply a case of saying,
that's a good question.
Because the kids are let down, right?
OK, but something has to be done.
Yeah.
Now, normally what happens now, big government turns around and says, we're going to have an increased sugar tax, we're going to have an extra tax, for instance, on Deliveroo's or whatever.
Yeah.
So, right. And then, of course, you get the right saying, look, you're interfering with people's right to choose their own weight, right? So what would you do? What would you do from your end?
I've thought about this. We don't have VAT on food, quite rightly. I think you probably would have VAT. And we were talking about fatty food. Fats aren't bad. It's about certain kinds of fats. Kids aren't struggling because of avocados and grass-fed lamb.
Yeah.
I would have a VAT on processed foods, and I would use the money you raise from that, which wouldn't be much, but it would be something, to probably reduce VAT on everything else. So I'd have, VAT of 16% on everything, including food, which is unhealthy.
I mean, if you go out to eat in a restaurant, of course, you've still got your VAT on your meals.
Or takeaways,
Or takeaways, we've still got it. But I don't know how you dissuade people, because fat and sugar is delicious.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. You could probably put 40% on. And I just say people who are already struggling with balancing their books by the end of the week, they're still choosing to have takeaway, not cook at home.
Yeah, true. But something has gone dramatically wrong.
Yeah, dramatically.
It's not just a little thing. And then, all the doctors are saying, if you carry this amount of weight, it does. And also the food that you eat, if you read that item there, actually is damaging you as well. So it's not only the weight which is a health problem for you, actually there's a physical problem by the quality of the food you eat. So I'd like to hear from your viewers, actually, from what would they say was the answer. You try and feed cauliflower to to a kid under 18.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've seen the state, particularly in the last 4 years, be more muscular and involved in the minutiae of our lives than we've ever seen before. And yet, it does still seem when it comes to this issue, they won't still get involved. Like, they mandated us that we could walk around the block once in lockdowns. You could only leave your house and go for a walk. Well, maybe they should mandate that you have to walk around the block once every day. I don't want that, but do you see what I mean? The difference is they were so prepared.
You do actually post-COVID, what is the bizarre aspect, if my high street's anything to go by, and generally, is people do appear to be walking around in a way that...
Whether you like it or not, because the trains never turn up.
They didn't, yeah, that's right.
Run here. Got my heart rate up.
Walk to Paddington from Portsmouth, that would be a good one, isn't it?
But it's the combination, isn't it, of high-fat, high-sugar food, which arrives with a motorbike and does not walk in anywhere or doing anything. A lot of the swimming pools closed during lockdown, never opened again. A lot of the gyms closed down, never opened again. Yeah. You've got volunteers who work with kids on sports teams, particularly more senior people, who didn't ever come back after lockdowns to run the local swimming team or whatever they were volunteering to do.
Is that true, though? Has there been a reduction?
Yep, scoutmasters,
organised...
things like that, absolutely. Because you had some people who might have been in their late 60s, let's say 70s, who might have spent 20 years volunteering at the local scout hut. It was closed for lockdowns, and then they just then, I'm never going to go back to do it. So the kids, again, are the ones that have suffered. We need to get them moving. We need to get kids moving as much as possible.
Well, do you know what I found really interesting? Because we did that show recently, didn't we, up in West Cumbria?
Yes, in Lincolnshire. And it was Cumbria, yeah.
And I was walking around Whitehaven. Yeah. I was walking around and loads of people were thin. And I thought, is it because they're all going to the Lake District at the weekend?
Very possibly.
You know, and it's more people should be doing that. Obviously, it's about time that families have.
Or knowing Whitehaven a little bit, that they're so poor they can't afford Deliveroo's. How about that?
Well, maybe.
Lots of people look very healthy, was my point.
Yeah, but there is that. But that socio-economic issue. The poorer you are, generally, the bigger you are. Anyway, that's clearly demonstrated by the statistics. Not necessarily, you know, but you can also be very thin and very nutritionally deprived as well. But I do think it's partly to do with the parents getting involved. And you said earlier, Kelvin, about why don't parents get involved? You have to say no to your children all the time now because of the proliferation of fast food. It is everywhere. Every train platform has got a vending machine. It doesn't have fruit in it. It's got sugar and chocolate, and every till is surrounded by sweets. It's everywhere. So when we were growing up, your parents might just put your dinner on the table, and if you didn't want it, well, you didn't get anything else. Yeah. But now we're indulging kids all the time.
Also, if you look at the faiths historically, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity, there was a measure of fasting or prohibitions on what you eat. This is a very ancient idea that actually you shouldn't have what you want when you want all the time. It's good for your soul, it's good for your health. So maybe we'll see a return to intermittent fasting, I don't know. You know,
well, we are, aren't we? It's becoming very fashionable now from a diet point of view.
People should be doing it. It seems to be very effective.
Well, one of the big diets of the moment is that 5 and 2.
That's right.
Isn't it? And that
5 days eating, 2 days not.
Yeah, and that seems to... but as you can see from my face, of course, I have eschewed that myself, but other people...
You look very healthy.
You look very healthy, Kelvin, to me. Get in touch at home, won't you? Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. We're sitting soft this evening, so it's quite nice here on the sofas, isn't it?
Very chatty, very chatty.
Now, British farmers are calling for a universal basic income. Is subsidising farming the only answer to Britain's food security? Don't go anywhere.
Hello again. It's a wet night for many of us with spells of rain crossing the country, staying cold in the north, and as those spells of rain move north, well, we'll see some hill snow across parts of Scotland. But low pressure well and truly in charge at the moment. One low departing into the North Sea, the next low coming along for tonight, another low on the way for the weekend. That's been named Storm Kathleen by Met Éireann because the strongest winds will be across Ireland. But it will be a windy night tonight with outbreaks of heavy and persistent rain, particularly for western hills of Britain at first and then into Scotland by dawn. That rain through the central belt could cause some issues, and above 250 metres we're going to see some snow building up north of the central belts, and so that could affect some higher routes of central Scotland during the morning, up to 10 centimetres in places. But that does peter out through the morning, and by the afternoon some brighter spells emerge, especially across parts of England and Wales, where there'll also be some heavy showers, and it will stay blustery, although the wind coming from the south will lead to temperatures of 18 Celsius or so across parts of the southeast. In Scotland, it stays cold, and it's another wet start for Scotland on Saturday morning. Spells of rain moving north once again, followed by showers, and it's a windy day. Those winds peaking in western parts of the UK at 50 to 70 miles an hour, leading to big waves, leading to disruption in places. But it's also going to be relatively warm with some brightness by the afternoon, and in the east of England, highs of 20 to 22 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Gary King. In Hampshire, the southbound M3, there's a lane closed and delays after an accident involving a lorry around junction 5 at Hook. Elsewhere in Bedfordshire, the northbound M1, long delays. There's a lane closed due to emergency repairs just between junction 11A at Dunstable and 12 at Flitwick. Delays going back towards junction 8 at Hemel Hempstead. Problems in Cambridgeshire at 6 Mile Bottom. The northbound A11 is currently blocked. Long delays due to an accident between 6 Mile Bottom and the A14 at 9 Mile Hill. Warwickshire northbound M6, there's a lane closed due to a breakdown around junction 4A at the M42, and in Cheshire the northbound M6, long delays after an earlier breakdown around junction 20 at the M56 at the Lymm interchange. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner. We're on the sofa tonight. It's very relaxed. Thank you for joining us. You've all been getting in touch at home on these honey trap MPs. This is at least a dozen. I think more of them might come out who were targeted by fake emails to get compromising material on them. Martin said, enjoying the hypocrisy of these self-serving careerist politicians. And Steve has said, so it's people, not technology, which is our weakest link. In this case, male MPs thinking with their nether regions at the expense of national security. Don't be an MP if you're trying to have it all. We're trusting our country with these people. And on obesity, we were just talking about the fact that we're eating 50% more calories thanks to lockdowns because we're all now addicted to takeaways, which is delivered to the door. Linda said, I live in Portugal and it is not possible to buy clothes over a size 16 to 18. You never see really obese people here. I think it must be because they cannot buy big sizes. John says, my gob, my money, my choice, my life. Right, keep your messages coming. Right, moving on. Aaron Bastani's still here and Kelvin McKenzie, of course. Now, farmers are calling for the government to give them a universal basic income, saying the post-Brexit agriculture subsidy scheme has left many of them worse off. Do farmers need more money from the state, or do we need to leave it up to the free market? Kelvin, where do you stand on this?
I'm never in favour of a kind of guaranteed income.
Yeah.
And if I was going to give anybody a guaranteed income, I'd probably give it. You probably have to start thinking about Uber drivers as well. So I'm not in favour of that. The issue here is that there are, I think, only 100 signed up to this so far. And if anybody puts you a petition in front of you and says, "Are you in favour of?" Receiving money for which you don't have to work or don't have to, then I'm afraid everybody signs for it. So I'm not. And the other aspect of this is that when you're in farming, you only get paid when the stuff comes out of the ground. So they're used to an enormously risky profession. None of them want to get out of it, right? Obviously, I recognise that they work damned hard. We need every piece of food that we can grow, we don't have to import. I agree with all that. But at the same time, I'm afraid the land is probably worth quite a bit of money, and they themselves have a freedom to do what they want to do with their lives.
We don't want them to sell that land, though, do we? Have you seen the No Farmers, No Food campaign?
They'll sell it to another farmer, right? And that may be what happens, that you can't have these small patchwork areas. You have to have large farming, and they have to be industrial farming.
Go on, Aaron. Where do you stand on this? I mean, the phrase universal basic income, are you comfortable with that? That does make my blood run a bit cold.
Well, it's a very left-wing idea, actually. You might be surprised I'm not a supporter of UBI.
OK.
Oh, right.
I'm a big fan of universal basic services, access to the kind of welfare provision or public services that people are at least familiar with. You might not agree with it, but you recognise access to education, healthcare, etc.
Yeah.
Funded through progressive taxation.
Which we have that, though.
We have that, exactly. It's eroding in some places, it's growing in others, but people are familiar with that idea.
Yeah.
In terms of this, where I disagree is that people aren't leaving farming, but what's really interesting, if you speak to farmers, you speak to their kids, the children don't want to do it. I mean, I know somebody who's the son of farmers. They will absolutely not take over that business because the returns are low, it's hard work, and the risk thing is such an important variable here. We never think about it, the rest of us, you know, the rest of the world. If you speak to somebody like an Italian wine grower, they might have vines in Tuscany. You think, what a wonderful life. Wonderful. They're constantly panicking about the weather. It's not going to rain this week. It's going to be too hot that week. And they're constantly on edge. They're constantly anxious. Very difficult game. Not much money. And I think just from a perspective of food security, I don't know if I agree with this idea. I'm certainly open to it. And I think we should be growing as much food as possible. If this helps us get there, if it's value for money, I'm all for it.
But that assessment is so bleak. If what you're saying is the next generation won't take over their farms, and or the farmers who are there now, who don't have any cash but know that they're sitting on a lot of land which might be worth a lot of money for housing or even a field of solar panels, who's going to grow the food that we need to eat? What's plan B?
No, I mean, most of our country, I think 4/5 of the country now is basically farmland, or something just slightly less than that, actually. But I don't worry about that, nor do I worry about farmers whose children don't want to go into it. I've heard that same argument about blood on the till in corner shops. Right? And actually, there are as many corner shops today, if they can thrive anyway, as there ever were. So, look, I do agree that the two words which will worry our country are food security. After all, having looked at Russia and the way that the Ukraine was considered the breadbasket of Europe, right? Yeah. And today, you know, there is a kind of deal to allow this stuff to go out of the Ukraine, and the only reason they allow it is because there are starving Africans if they don't get hold of that grain. So it is a worry for ourselves, and we should do everything to encourage people to stay into farming, short of, I just don't believe that it's a good idea to pay people when we don't have to. Well,
maybe, I mean, and of course we'll be talking about, this is the state, will be supporting our farmers. Shouldn't it just be that the supermarkets can pay the farmers a fairer price for their produce? Or maybe the supermarkets should be giving them a universal basic income and come to some sort of deal with the farmers whereby the supermarkets subsidise them.
Have you ever heard of those negotiations? They are the supermarket, the guys, so people in charge of potatoes or the people in charge of this, that and that, they are vile. Beyond vile. They turn around to say the potato guy and say, well, not only are we not going to pay you, A, what you want, or B, what you had last year, what we're going to do now is we're now going to put an advert on television, and you'll be pleased to know that you are going to pay for that advert. And by the way, if you don't like it, we can get potatoes from anywhere in the world at no different price to you. It is a nightmare job. I knew a guy who actually was in the production side of cakes, right? He said, honestly, it was the biggest mistake he ever made in his life, because once you get onto their gravy train of what is their big companies, right, you stay with it. They treat you absolutely shockingly, which is why the government set up a board where independents can go and complain about supermarkets. The problem with doing that, as you might expect, is that the supermarkets say, really, you're going to do that to us, are you? Right. We don't expect, whether you win or you lose, don't expect to get any business from us. It is an absolute nightmare.
Racket, isn't it? It's a nightmare for them. Right, we're going to take a quick break now. Don't go anywhere, because reports of learner drivers cheating on theory tests have tripled in 2 years, with over 1,600 incidents recorded. Are young people too lazy to sit and take a test? And what should the penalties be if you're trying to duck out of that exam? See you in a minute.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who, at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the Red Wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's Dewbs & Co, but it's me, Bev Turner, tonight, keeping me company until 7 o'clock. Former editor of The Sun, Kelvin MacKenzie, and co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Now, the number of learner drivers cheating on their theory tests has tripled in the past 2 years. In 2020 to 21, there were 568 cases of cheating, but in the following 2 years, that figure rose to nearly 1,700. So are young people just too lazy to revise? Aaron, I'm guessing you sat your driving test more recently than me or Kelvin. In fact, have you done your driving test?
No, I've done the theory. I don't drive.
My
wife does the driving, yeah.
Why have you done your theory if you didn't sit the test?
I don't know, it's just something I wanted to get out of the way. But I've never needed to drive. We lived in London until, 5 years ago? Now we have a child and it's sort of a bit...
So if you've done your...
shambles, my wife has to drive me everywhere.
If you've done your theory test, can you sit your test... Once you've done it, have you done it? Or does it only have a certain limited amount of time when it's still valid?
I think it probably does, in a couple of years.
So explain to us how it's possible to cheat on your theory test.
I have a theory about the theory test. Mm-hmm. There's two aspects here. So there's about highway code and then there's awareness. I can only conclude that they've been sending people along
That's
to
right.
impersonate themselves.
That's what it is. And there was one guy, let me tell you about a furniture salesman, Asif Saber. He's 35 years old. He travelled from Birmingham to South Yorkshire to sit exams. He did it for 3 different people, for 3 mates. They paid him 100 quid each. And then he got recognised at one of the staff.
There should be a really severe punishment for that,
He got 6 months in prison.
Yeah, it should be.
Did he?
Yeah. But I think... But then shouldn't the person who've sent them to cheat on their behalf be penalised as well.
Yeah, sure, and I'm astonished that hasn't happened. Do you know whether that's happened or not?
As far as I know, no.
Because normally both sides would get done for that.
Yeah.
I suppose he's the one who's impersonating somebody. It's
Correct.
on his part.
So
right?
he took their provisional driving licence and said, "This is me," for 3 of his mates, who he must presumably look quite like, and then they busted him on the 3rd occasion. But what's going on, Aaron? Why aren't these young people? I presume they're young, although he was 35. Why won't they sit the test?
I suspect something like that. It's probably always happened.
Yeah.
But the fact you have social media, you have WhatsApp, you have Telegram. Now people say, actually, this particular centre is really loose on things. This person doesn't check it. You're actually far more likely to get away with this than you realise.
But don't they understand it's quite important to know what a street sign means so you don't drive the wrong way down a street? It's not like sitting...
No, it's true. You get found out eventually, right?
It's really important that you know what you're doing.
When you say that, let's be honest about it. If there's a sign which says 30 on it, you get the general drift of what speed you should be doing, or 70, or a light there. I think people know enough of the signs, and that the ones that they've invented today, nobody takes any notice of anyway. I mean, would you know what a sign was of some? The one that makes me laugh is and I'm amazed it got through. Is the one about the old deer with
the walking stick.
With the walking stick. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that there are a lot of old people walking across the road?
Yes.
And what makes them say that? Is it because there's an old folks home there?
Yeah.
But
or
honestly, do you take any notice of that, or do you accelerate?
No, I don't accelerate, Kelvin. No, not if I know there's going to be old people. But also, I recently had to do my speed awareness course.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got busted for doing 32 in a 30 or something from one of the many cameras on the streets. And I actually really enjoyed it. I really genuinely enjoyed it.
And you learned something, didn't you?
I learned something from it. And that's what I mean. When you drive your car and you need to understand what's on the roads, it's really important that I think it is important that you understand that if you take that bend too quickly, you're likely to end up in that hedge. But it's the fact that people think they can just get away with it. Is it just about the fact that it's tech?
Like I say, I think people have always done it.
But we haven't had this theory test for that long, have we? I didn't have to sit a written theory test when I passed my test.
No, but you did get questioned about...
But you'd get questioned by your driving instructor, wouldn't you, in the car? So you couldn't fake it.
I'm sure some people have impersonated other people when doing their actual test. You know, if there was somebody that would pass them. I'm sure that's always happened.
You seem very relaxed about it.
No, he doesn't drive. It doesn't affect him. What we should have is Mrs. Bastani
here. She's a very good driver.
Shouldn't you, talking about
She's a very good driver. I mean, I think also, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that there's been a shift in the last couple of decades where people take this kind of thing less seriously. If you can get away with something, you will do it. Whereas I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, it just wasn't the done thing. Yeah. I think that's gone. If you think you'll get caught, I still think people won't do it. But that now seems to be the only disincentive to this stuff.
Yeah.
I might get caught. Whereas before it was improper, you're being a bad citizen. I think we've lost some of that.
We have lost something about that, haven't we, about the idea that there is just...
And also the other thing and I first noticed it in America, and when I worked in America, and I was astonished about it, that people can go off to jail and can come back into society. This was in America, and could even run for office, or they could run a business, or they could do something. Right? Everything was fine. That wasn't the same in the UK. This was in the 80s. Now, I think we are in a similar position. So that guy there does his 6 months, or does 3 months, or whatever. Out he comes, right? Hello, Tom. How are you? All right. And he can start his life again. And you have to say, don't you? So you get a criminal records check.
Yeah.
But, we're short of employees. I wonder whether
it really matters so much
anymore. The guy comes straight back to work again.
Let's see what our viewers have been saying about this. The driving test theory cheats. Dave says the punishment should be a ban on the applicant resitting the test for a period of time. The person taking the test for another should be fined and banned from driving for a period of time. I mean, this guy went to prison, Dave. Stephen says we have enough dangerous drivers on the roads as it is. If you cheat, then you're putting other road users and pedestrians at risk. The punishment for being being found cheating needs to be really big to scare people off and risking lives. Sandra has said it's quite simple, Bev, like cheating at any exam. If you get caught, you're barred from the exam, you can't take it again and you don't get the qualification, therefore no driving licence. I mean, you all seem quite strict about this, and David said cheats and all involved should be disqualified for 10 years, second offence, ban them for life.
Right. Well, one of the issues you have about that is, yeah, OK, fine, have 7 years, 10 years, 20 years, lifetime ban. People just don't take any notice. They will be driving around without insurance and without a driving licence. And imagine what driving without insurance means for anybody that they decide to crash into for some inexplicable reason. So I'm not in favour of long bans. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be banned for 6 months or a year or something. They'll find that the cost of their insurance will be through the roof anyway.
I think more importantly, in terms of driving than this probably, is mobile phones, because everybody you see on the road, isn't there? You see them going down the motorway in the fast lane, driving at 80 miles an hour and looking at the mobile phone. Right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Great to see you, Kelvin and Aaron.
Pleasure.
Up next is Nigel Farage. I wonder if he's got a bit of a hangover from his birthday party last night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. It's a wet night for many of us, with spells of rain crossing the country, staying cold in the north, and as those spells of rain move north, well, we'll see some hill snow across parts of Scotland. But low pressure well and truly in charge at the moment. One low departing into the North Sea, the next low coming along for tonight, another low on the way for the weekend. That's been named Storm Kathleen by Met Éireann, because the strongest winds will be across Ireland. But it will be a windy night tonight, with outbreaks of heavy and persistent rain, particularly for western hills of Britain at first and then into Scotland by dawn. That rain through the central belt could cause some issues, and above 250 metres we're going to see some snow building up north of the central belt, and so that could affect some higher routes of central Scotland during the morning, up to 10 centimetres in places. But that does peter out through the morning, and by the afternoon some brighter spells emerge, especially across parts of England and Wales, where there'll also be some heavy showers, and it will stay blustery, although the wind coming from the south will lead to temperatures of 18 Celsius or so across parts of the southeast. In Scotland it stays cold, and it's another wet start for Scotland on Saturday morning. Spells of rain moving north once again, followed by showers, and it's a windy day. Those winds peaking in western parts of the UK at 50 to 70 miles an hour, leading to big waves, leading to disruption in places. But it's also going to be relatively warm, with some brightness by the afternoon, and in the east of England, highs of 20 to 22 Celsius.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel